$2 billion. That's the estimated amount Emirates is investing in renovating the cabins of an aircraft whose production has already ended. New first-class seats, redesigned business class, premium economy installed from scratch, Starlink on every aircraft, 18 days in the hangar per plane. More than 50 units are still in line to receive the transformation. And Emirates isn't the only one. Airlines on 4 continents are doing exactly the same thing. More than 10 operators, from the Middle East to Asia, from Europe to the United States, are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into modernizing this very same model. New cabins, new technology, new entertainment, on an aircraft that, on paper, has already been surpassed. Today, there are roughly 600 passenger 777-300ERs flying around the world. It's the second most numerous wide-body in operation, trailing the 787-9 by only a handful of units. And here's a detail that makes all of this hard to explain. In a direct comparison, the A350-1000 burns approximately 25% less fuel per seat than the 777-300ER. On a 14-hour route, that difference can translate into tens of thousands of pounds of fuel saved flight after flight, day after day. The math seems obvious. If a more efficient aircraft exists, why are the world's largest airlines spending billions to keep the older model instead of replacing it? The answer isn't as simple as most people think, and I'm going to show you why right now. The first explanation most people would imagine is fuel. Newer aircraft burn less. An A350-1000, for example, consumes approximately 25% less fuel per seat than a 777-300ER on routes of equivalent range. In an industry where jet fuel represents a massive share of costs, that should settle the debate. New plane burns less. Old plane burns more. Replace the plane. In theory, the math seems simple. In practice, that's exactly where almost everyone gets it wrong. Because fuel, as significant as it is, isn't the only cost an airline faces. And it's not even the main one when it comes to deciding whether it's worth retiring an entire fleet. The decision to replace an aircraft doesn't start at the wing, it starts on the balance sheet. A white body like the A350 or the 787 doesn't cost $20 or $30 million. It costs between $300 and $400 million per unit. Now multiply that by the size of a fleet. If an airline needs to replace 40 777-300ERs, the investment can exceed $10 billion. And that capital doesn't appear out of thin air. It needs to be financed. It needs to generate a return. And that return needs to offset not just the fuel cost of the old aircraft, but the entire financial cost that comes with acquiring the new one. And this is where the logic shifts completely. Because when an airline finances the purchase of dozens of wide-bodies, it takes on long-term debt that ties up cash flow for 15, 20 years. The operational savings exist, but the cost of the capital that finances those savings also exists. And in many cases, the latter outweighs the former. Up to this point, the problem is already bigger than it first appeared. Replacement isn't simply a matter of efficiency, it's a return on investment equation that stretches across decades. But there's another factor that makes this equation even more unfavorable. The aircraft that was supposed to replace the 777-300ER in Boeing's lineup simply isn't arriving. The 777X, specifically the 777-9, has accumulated more than 6 years of delays. Certification, which was expected in 2020, has been repeatedly postponed and has forced some airlines like Lufthansa to adjust their fleet plans. For airlines like Emirates, which holds one of the largest 777-9 orders on the books, this creates an operational problem on a scale far greater than most people realize. You can't retire the old aircraft if the new one doesn't exist yet, but you also can't offer your customers a cabin from the previous decade. That would go against everything Emirates stands for. Hence the million-dollar retrofit investments in aircraft like the A380 and the 777-300ER solely to cover for the 777X delays. And with each passing quarter, those investments become even more necessary. But the 777XX delay alone wouldn't explain why airlines that already have A350s,
Airlines that could already be transitioning are also keeping their 777-300ERs in service. And this is where the problem changes scale, because it stops being about a single delayed aircraft program and becomes about the entire industry. Global aviation is currently facing an unprecedented aircraft shortage. The global backlog, the volume of aircraft ordered but not yet delivered, has hit a record. Boeing and Airbus combined have more than 14,000 aircraft on their books, but production capacity can't keep up with demand. Supply chain issues, a shortage of skilled labor, difficulties with engine suppliers, all of this has drastically reduced the pace of deliveries. The result is that the global fleet is aging. Inevitably, airlines must continue operating older aircraft, and this has created an interesting effect in the aircraft market. When the supply of new aircraft shrinks, the value of existing aircraft rises, including, and perhaps especially, the 777-300ER. There's a reason this specific aircraft has become so hard to replace. It's not just because it's big, or because it flies far, or because it's reliable. It's because it combines all three of those qualities in a balance that almost no other widebody can match. In a typical 3-class configuration, the model carries between 350 and 400 passengers while maintaining one of the highest dispatch reliability rates in commercial aviation. In other words, very few aircraft can complete as many flights without delays caused by technical issues. That means it generates extremely high revenue per flight on long-haul routes. And here's the detail that changes the entire analysis. Most of the 777-300ERs in service today have been fully depreciated. An aircraft whose acquisition cost has already been paid off no longer carries the financial weight of the purchase. It only generates operating costs. And when you remove the acquisition portion from the equation, the profit margin on every flight increases disproportionately. A fully paid-off 777-300ER can be significantly more profitable per flight than a financed A350, even while burning more fuel. And the explanation is straightforward. The fuel savings of the new aircraft don't offset the difference between an asset that's already been paid for and one that's still being paid off. But even that explanation is still incomplete, because replacing a fleet doesn't just mean buying new aircraft. There's an entire logistical undertaking behind it, one that carries significant financial weight for airlines. Pilots need to be trained on new simulators. Each type transition can take months. Maintenance engineers need specific certifications. Parts inventories need to be overhauled. Specialized tooling needs to be purchased. Hangars may need modifications. Maintenance contracts, operations manuals, dispatch procedures, planning systems, everything changes. And every one of those changes has a cost. These costs rarely show up in a surface-level analysis, but added together, they can amount to hundreds of millions of dollars per airline. That means the true cost of retiring the 777-300ER isn't just the price of the aircraft that takes its place. It's the price of that aircraft plus the cost of adapting the entire operation to receive it. And there's yet another factor. Every dollar spent on new aircraft is a dollar that can't fund something else. New routes, hub expansion, acquiring competitors, reducing debt, cash reserves for crises. Every company operates with limited capital, and when an airline directs billions toward fleet renewal, that capital is locked up for years. The decision to replace an aircraft isn't just an efficiency decision, it's a priority decision. And for many airlines, keeping an asset that's already been paid for, that generates high margins, and that operates with strong reliability is financially the best possible allocation of capital. When you place the two scenarios side by side, the difference becomes clear. On one side, an airline operating a fully paid-off 777-300ER. Acquisition cost? Zero. Higher operating costs? Yes, but no associated debt. Net margin per flight? High. On the other, an airline financing a new A350. Superior efficiency? Yes, but with acquisition payments that tie up cash flow for 2 decades.
Net margin per flight in the short and medium term, lower. The transition pays off eventually, but not now. And not now is exactly the calculation most airlines are making. And that calculation shows up clearly when you look at how different airlines are handling the same dilemma. Air France-KLM, for example, chose a gradual transition. They didn't retire the entire fleet at once. They're receiving A350s slowly while extending the operation of the 777-300ERs for a few more years. JAL took a different approach. They chose a more aggressive replacement using the A350-1000 as the direct successor to the 777-300ER. Neither one is wrong. Both are answering the same question. Given the available capital, what replacement sequence maximizes return? The answer depends on specific variables: fleet size, routes operated, financial health, access to credit, currency exposure, delivery backlog. But the reasoning is the same. Replacement isn't a question of technology. It's a question of when the math changes. And that's exactly where the entire story converges. The 777-300ER doesn't keep flying because airlines are ignoring the efficiency of modern aircraft. It keeps flying because up to this point, the complete financial equation, cost of capital, transition costs, delivery shortages, opportunity costs, operating margin of a paid-off asset, still favors keeping it. It's not conservatism, it's not attachment, it's return on capital. The smartest decision isn't always replacing something old with something new. Sometimes it's recognizing that the most valuable asset in the fleet isn't the most modern one. It's the one that's already been fully paid for. The next time a 777-300ER crosses the sky above you, an aircraft whose production has already ended, whose replacement still hasn't arrived, remember that it's not there for lack of alternatives. It's there because at this exact moment, there is no better financial decision.